Jake Broder, welcome to Cultural Attaché.
Thank you.
We're here to talk about your play, Unraveled, which is having its world premiere at the Wallis Center for the Performing Arts in Beverly Hills, October 17th through 19th. So before we go too deep into it, can you give me just a really quick description of what Unraveled is?
Unraveled is a play about Anne Adams, who is a was a 53-year-old scientist who became a painter all of a sudden. And the play is about how she became an artist all of a sudden. And her connection, all of a sudden, she became obsessed with Ravel's Bolero. And uh, her artistic abilities took a big leap at the age of 53, which is kind of strange. And her personality started to change. And it turns out she got a diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia, which is a kind of condition which doesn't affect memory like Alzheimer's, it affects behavior. And uh, it changed her quite profoundly. And she continued to paint. Her relationship with her husband changed quite profoundly. And then it turns out that she, not only did she have a diagnosis, but Ravel had the same disease. And he composed Bolero at the same point in the disease that she started painting.
So how did you first become aware of this story?
I was listening to Radiolab, and Jad Abumrad and Robert Krulwich did this great 20-minute piece called Unraveling Boléro, which told me the story of it. I had one of those public radio sitting in my car moments where I couldn't get out of it until it was over. And at the time, my father had something was going on and we didn't know what it was. We didn't have a diagnosis yet, but it was that really fearful place. And I realized later, some people never even get out of that sort of nameless fear. But at that point, I was really scared. And I heard this story about how there was a kind of dementia that provides a burst of creativity before before things start to deteriorate. And it filled me with hope. And that hope was a little bit stronger than the fear. And at that point, I knew I was sort of duty bound to try and tell this story because if it could make me feel that, then it could probably help other people.
Now, Maurice Ravel is quoted as having said, I did my work slowly, drop by drop, I tore it out of me by pieces. I'm hoping your process of creating and writing Unraveled wasn't quite so torturous.
First of all, uh, Ravel is a major composer, and I'm a monkey throwing spaghetti at the wall. So it's not even like comparable. But uh, I think of him as slow and methodical rather than tortured. And uh, he was a masterful technician and a masterful orchestrator and a sort of like a watchmaker, very detailed, very iterative. And my process is more in fits and starts. There are times where, the first draft of this, I had to draft this 3 times before I I did one, I threw it away. I did one, I threw it away. And then I did one and I was like, oh, okay, this one, those are fast processes. And then the slow process of revision and intricate kind of watchmaky details. It's kind of all of it. Sometimes it is tortured. Sometimes it is very slow and methodical. Sometimes it is sort of trying to capture lightning in a bottle, you know. But also, this is a deeply collaborative, there's 30 people working on this right now. And so it's not just about me, it's about all of this creativity that comes from other people and how that is integrated inside it because there's the direction, there's the acting, but there's also the music and there's the paintings and the video and and the set and all costumes, all these things are sort of integrated in to tell the story. And so, a script is merely a blueprint. It's
But
not the building.
right, but you can't build the house without the blueprint. I mean, you could say Shakespeare is just the blueprint as well.
I guess. Yes.
But as blueprints go, he did some good ones.
I've never known any better.
Um,
Uh, yeah.
well, take me back to February 25th, 2021, because I believe that's the date that you released Unraveled, virtually during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, how has the play evolved in the 4+ years since then?
The script has been given FTD. Uh, the form and the content have become more married. I'll give you one example, but this is all throughout. In the middle of the play, there's a scene when you go to 1927 in Paris and you meet Ida, Rubinstein, and Ravel together for the first time. And then you have a scene where Robert and Anne are in their home having supper. And the key moment is when both Ravel and Anne take a steak knife from the wrong end and wind up cutting their hands. And that is evidence to their respective partners that something is wrong that needs to be dealt with. Those scenes used to be like this, separate, distinct. Now they're like this. And we call it the fugue, where you have two couples at the same time in different places interacting simultaneously, almost like a string quartet. That bending of time and space, I'm kind of, leaning on things like Arcadia or that kind of language, uh, is now woven throughout the play.
Um, Given that you have your own personal relationship to dementia vis-a-vis your father, how much did your experience with him inform perhaps how Robert and Anne relate to each other throughout the course of the play?
Uh, it's in the dynamics of dealing with a dementia diagnosis in a family is very much in my heart. It occupies a very big space inside my whole being. Uh, so I think it informs it from in an emotional context point of view. Uh, Dramatically, the bits of the relationship between Anne and Robert, it's very particular and one almost engineers. It's all about the mistakes. It's all about the red herrings and the misnomers and the it's the getting it wrong. It's the story of a lot of it is the story of how we get it wrong and misappropriate or attribute behavior incorrectly in a relationship when there's a diagnosis. So I and the experience of a what it means to be a caregiver and this perspective shift inside uh insofar as love between two people is supremely attached to identity, and when identity changes, how does love transform and where are the boundaries? Uh those, thankfully, are not questions that my parents are asking. So, there but for the grace of God go I. But I'm looking, I think I wrote this in a lot of ways because I was looking into the abyss and I wanted to find a way through it. So characters who were struggling with it and find their way through to where love wins 51-49 is perhaps a bit of wish fulfillment on my part, but it also is a way, and I've done this in a lot of the things I write about, is that I think about the things I wind up writing about the things that I'm most afraid of. And it's a way of me publicly processing these fears, or, my job is projecting emotions onto others. So
But does the process of looking into the abyss or, confronting these things that you fear allow you to see something beautiful on the other side of that?
sometimes, yes, usually that's the hope. And yeah, that's that's why that's why you go through the fire. And then to try and share what you find.
So if you're looking at Louis Prima and Keeley, or you're looking at John Wilkes Booth's brother, what was it in those stories that you were fearful of that prompted the examination of their lives, or at least those moments in their lives?
Louis Prima and Keely Smith was a story about a man who was incapable of loving, who was addicted to the approval of an audience and could not accept a one-to-one loving relationship that was actually both creatively, spiritually, and deeply fulfilling. And he blew it because he went and shagged the fans as a way to make sure he felt relevant and was desperate to be relevant. And that was, consuming in his soul. And as a writer, as an actor, as a artist, I wrestle with those ego demons all the time. And that was like, what's the worst version of myself that could possibly be? And where does that lead? So it was a real sort of real decimation of ego. And that's a good, I don't know, it feels healthy in a weird kind of way, even though it's extreme. Uh, John Wilkes Booth, that whole story about Edwin Booth was actually a story about how it really was Edwin's fault. He could have stopped that whole thing. He was not kind. He cared too much about being the best actor in the world and safeguarding. He was visiting, he had his he inherited the mantle from his father and wouldn't share it. And, John Wilkes Booth was a beautiful mangled creature who needed love and support, and it was withheld from him by somebody who had the power to give it. And it was sort of it wasn't about politics. It was about fame. It was about the quick and easy way to fame and notoriety, born of desperation. And Edwin, the greatest actor of the 19th century, could have given his brother a piece and helped him, and he didn't. And hilarity ensued. So, I don't know. It's sort of that story to me is a lot like The Godfather, but instead of immigration and sort of the immigrant experience of America, this is more about legacy fame, and it has its modern incarnation in the idea of, I think John Wilkes Booth was the first school shooter. He was the first celebrity murderer. And we're still sick with that today. So that was a gaze, that abyss was about a family sickness that was visited upon the whole fabric of our nation. It's a parable about kind of who we are and still are.
Absolutely. Um, as it relates to Maurice Ravel's arguably best known composition, Bolero, um, what was your relationship to that piece of music before you heard this NPR story, before you started exploring this story as a subject for a play?
I played it in orchestra when I was young. I've known it. It is it sort of occupied this weird sort of place. Personally, I appreciated its mechanics. I felt like it was largely a mechanical piece, but I also recognized that it had this emotional impact. So I sort of felt sort of split about it on one level, and I also knew that it shows up everywhere. That it is, from Torval and Dean to Ten to the film to Kurosawa to that Italian animation of it. It's like it's used and used and used and used. Why? Why? I was sort of in, why is it so popular? And I thought about the one thing I thought about it before I got into all this was that piece reminds me a lot of genetics because the same information repeated, repeated, repeated with a small variation is like mutation. Is like that's how genes move. It's like simple, e.g., not a lot of variables, one little change and iterated a lot of times. Uh, and then when I heard about what FTD is and how this piece of music fits into that, and the kind of creativity that exists inside frontotemporal dementia, I sort of freaked out a little bit because it feels like that composition is a perfect expression of the condition. It matches just perfectly. And I think Ravel was articulate enough to capture what was going on inside him. And his technique allowed him to express this thing. And it's highly accurate. So I see it very much as a feature, not a bug, of the condition. And uh, it's looking at it through that lens, I think it makes the piece so fascinating. It gives it a new layer of meaning, which I didn't see before.
I have to say that if I will never put Ravel's Bolero on by choice, I will never say, "Oh, I need to hear Bolero." But
Sure.
I've had a chance to see it in concert. I will do so because I find the experience of watching Bolero to be a great way of understanding orchestration because
Hmm.
you get to see how the sounds travel throughout the orchestra.
Yep.
That's a special kind of mind that can not just create that, but create that orchestration.
And listen to the audience at the end. Every time they freak out. It's like it's designed to blow your face off at the end. And
Yeah,
it
people of a
invariably,
certain age are all envisioning Bo Derek, but that's another thing altogether.
there are worse things to do with your time.
Absolutely. Now, if my research is correct, I saw that the European Journal of Neurology published Amaducci, Grassi, and Buller's theory about Ravel in 2002.
Yeah.
Um, and the report also referenced, because I read a good portion of it, the concerto for the left hand as also showing signs of FTD, which came 4 years after Bolero. Now, I know you know, this isn't something that you necessarily have an answer to, but I'm just curious. Do you see, particularly now that I know that you have music as a background, is there anything we can learn, do you think, about how Ravel's condition might have progressed in the 4 years between those two compositions?
I don't know left hand as well. Uh, but I do, well, as this is a progressive disease, it just gets, more and more. I think some of the repetitions and sort of almost perseverative nature of the left hand is absolutely part of the same sort of, it falls under the same list of symptoms. So I'd say yes. The answer is yes. I think there is something we can learn about that, and it would be very interesting, and it would take somebody wiser than I to do this, but I think that there is a amazing paper or thought to be had about tracking because he had it, and then there was the crash. Then he had the crash, which really changed a lot of things. But I think in that period between Bolero and the crash, there's a whole period of his music which I think, one could survey and really examine how things work in that regard.
Um, Bruce Willis suffering from FTD certainly gives your play a topicality that without those unfortunate circumstances, it wouldn't be something people would already know about. You don't have to educate them as much now as a result of Bruce Willis's condition. What are your hopes that Unraveled, you know, can do to help people understand that yes, they're getting compelling theater, but they're also getting, real information about something that could potentially affect them or certainly is affecting, a movie icon that they care about.
I think, well, the fact that Bruce Willis has this and the fact that Emma, his wife, has become an FTD advocate of the highest order and is uh, a absolutely wonderful partner in this, uh, and is helping us with a lot of our outreach activities, um, is really important. All right, two things. One, I think that when you have a disease that, Lou Gehrig's disease is pretty well funded and research for it moves along. Why? Because it has a name that people understand and have understood for a long time. And so that unlocks understanding and, more importantly, empathy. And that allows the process to move along. FTD is a different beast. It is behavioral, not amnestic. It's not memory, it's behavior, and it's a different thing. And also is the largest, most common form of dementia in the United States for people under 60. So it's not this far away rare thing. Uh, Having someone who people go, oh yeah, being able to say, hey, it's the same kind that Bruce Willis has, that people go, oh, okay. And they're willing to talk about it. They're willing to listen. So, okay, that's a good thing. And, God bless Emma for turning that pain into helping, because that takes a pretty brave soul to do that in real time. Second, we have, I think we're ready for a pink ribbon moment. And that's kind of what this whole thing is all about. When I grew up, cancer was something we whispered in the corners. Cancer. You didn't, you know, it was just fear. And then in 1991, I think it was Self magazine that came out with like a pink ribbon for breast cancer. And now we say, I'm fighting a battle with cancer and winning, or I'm fighting a battle with cancer and losing. But it's something, it has detached from the stigma. It has not completely divorced itself from fear, but it is not only fear. It's something we can talk about reasonably and make progress with. Dementia is this terrifying thing that people, if I ever have a diagnosis of dementia, just shoot me. I don't want to live. Like that's the most common thing I hear. We're living in the dark ages about it. We're just afraid. And we need something which there's tremendous advances both in therapeutics and in treatment and in all kinds of things happening where, we're not going to be able to cure it, but we're definitely right now, but we're at the beginning of therapeutics that in 10 years, in 20 years, it is not unreasonable to think that certain kinds of dementia might become chronic or preventable or be arrested at an early phase. Like we're knocking on the door of that right now. Therefore, we need a cultural shift to be able to talk about these things and to be able to have an emotional language to discuss it. In order to do that, we need to move people past the fear. How do you move people past fear? They have to have something to hold on to that is positive, and that's hope. And that's what this story evidences, which is what attracted me to it. It's not pointing at it and saying, oh, I wish. It's saying, here is an example of a neurodegenerative condition where where the brain transforms, but it doesn't only have deficits, it has enhancements. It's both. And if that's true, and the proof of that is Bolero, the proof of that is her painting. If that's true, then how much not everybody who has this is going to be a composer or an artist, but if it's true for them in this extreme case, how much is it true for all of us? A little bit. Ergo, there is cause to have some hope. So that's sort of working backwards. That's kind of how I'm thinking of it.
And you also do want people to actually have an enjoyable evening in the theater or afternoon if it's a matinee.
Oh, absolutely. This is not a didactic, teachy, feel bad thing. I want people to have such a good time they don't realize what a bad time they're having. My main job in all of this is to ensorcel and amaze the audience and get into your heart. And you know I hope an audience sees this and feels the mystery and the wonder. That's what I'm trying to get at. And we're creating all of this outreach work around creating a brain health festival around it, both because when we've done the show before, people want to tell their stories and talk, and it sort of opens people up a bit, which is great. They have all this positive energy, and then like, where should that go? Well, so we created this huge outreach program that surrounds the play so that that energy has somewhere to go that's positive, both for themselves and for the community. But also it alleviates the pressure on the art itself to be either worthy or teachy. I can't, that's not what art is for. That's not what going to the theater is for. We're there to tell you a story and take you to a magical place, and it just like strap in. And I'm very conscious of wanting to look after the audience's kind of heart and take them to a place. That's our job.
So Bolero premiered nearly 100 years ago. It was November 20th, 1928
Mm.
at Paris Opera. And of course, the audience went crazy. And then one woman apparently screamed out, "Ah foo," which translates to the madman. And Ravel supposedly responded when he heard about this, that lady, she understood.
She gets it.
She gets it.
Well, his ambivalent relationship to Bolero is brilliant because he both recognized that it would be the top line of his obituary and he hated it. And both of those things were true at the same time.
Yeah, I actually like the piano concerto in G as a top line for if I were writing his obituary, but he died before I was born, so I don't have to worry about that. But you obviously don't want people. You want people, I'm assuming, by the end of this play or through whatever explorations they're able to do, is to understand the quote unquote madman and not think of Ravel or Dr. Adams or anyone else who's dealing with this as anything more than human, anything less than human beings who have beautiful memories, beautiful stories, and beautiful lives, right?
Uh, I don't think it's that simple. I think that the idea that he hated this piece because it was probably more revealing. This was a man who was not comfortable revealing himself at all. He was a very guarded person in so many ways. And the fact that he hit a nerve in himself and Blur, you talked about how before, Ravel is this careful composer. For him, he burped out Bolero, which meant it came from a different place. And it made him dreadfully uncomfortable, probably because it was profoundly revealing. And so, on a lot of levels, it made him upset. So, somebody else validating that upsetness by going, he's nuts. That's nuts is kind of a good. I can see why Ravel would have found that attractive, especially because everybody else is going, "You're fantastic, you're amazing, this piece is the best." To have one person be like, "You're out of your gourd," and being able to be like, "Yeah, she gets it." I don't know. That strikes me as a quite an appealing. It's not about me saying he's nuts. It's about I him appreciating the off ramp and the self-identifying as like that was a crazy thing I did and it's a awful part of me and I'm more than happy to put that off to the side and have somebody else go, that's just bonkers. So, an artist's relationship to their own work is largely unimportant, but the in this case, it feels like part of the dramatic story of how do you treat when you know that things are changing in your brain, how do you treat yourself? It's a question more than an answer.